Hello, good night.
Good
Welcome
night.
to Legalize this 12th day of October. And tonight we are talking oil and gas. And we have with us Mr. V. Nazim Burke, the head of the technical working group, driving the oil and gas initiative. And we have also with us Dr. Raymond Nurse, who's a geologist. But before we get into the program, I just want to recognize those sponsoring this program: Gel Professional Solutions, Inc., Gem FM carrying this program on FM radio out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAM.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Welcome back. So, Mr. Burke is well known in these parts, being a former government minister. I don't think Dr. Nurse is as well known, so I will just ask him to essentially introduce himself and what does he consider as the importance of this work that he's involved in. You're muted. You're muted. Unmute yourself now.
Yes, I have done that.
Mm.
Yes, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to the organizer of this program for the invitation to come here and just say a few words or give a few ideas of what we are doing here in Grenada with respect to the oil and gas exploration. Well, I myself, what about me? Well, most people know me in Grenada, and I know myself with the name Gallo. That has been using since and ever. That I even attach most of my important emails, etc., with just Gallo. So the listeners outside, if you know, my first name would be guys I went to school with at GBSS or primary school. So Gallo, after finishing GBSS, that was in 1979. That coincided with what happened in March in 1979. So that was the year of the Grenada's revolution. And after finishing A-levels at GBSS, I was then awarded a scholarship to go to the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, known as East Germany, to study geology. And in that period between 1979 and 1983, we all know what happened in Grenada. We have an anniversary soon of these events. And that I was still just at the beginning of my geology courses. So I pursued and never intended to do a PhD in geology, but circumstances allowed me, from what I was experiencing in East Germany. I was encouraged by my profs there to do a PhD in geology. And so my areas of specialization varied throughout my different stages. And for my bachelor's, I was concerned myself mainly with water issues, hydrogeology, because I thought that would have been an important aspect to coming back to Grenada, knowing of our diverse amount of watersheds in Grenada. We know that we have over 71 watersheds in Grenada, and so there's a lot of water. The question is just how we manage water to solve some of our issues. Then I moved on and did a master's in geology. This one was also very complicated because I focus on mathematical, geological, let's say mapping and stuff like that. So that lead me to the question of exploration, geology, mainly though for mineral resources. So the question of how to calculate reserves, and that took me then to many countries in Africa as Germany became united or unified in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Then a lot of these countries where the Soviets were having their mainstay in these African countries, such like Mali and Angola, etc. So I was sent to some of these countries in order to calculate reserve. One of the expedition took me to Mali, where I had to calculate gold reserves at depths of 200 meters onshore. Later on, in the quest during my PhD, then another big exploration for me in working for German companies was to go to Madagascar and the Indian Ocean and to work on other mineral resources like graphite, and to understand the nature of basalt like we have in Grenada. Grenada constitutes the main rocks, the main backbone of Grenada, our basalt rocks. So who knows Grenada well, from the time you see that remnant rock structure over what we call Patrick David, the restaurant in Grand Mall. So whenever you drive in there and you look to your right, if you're coming from Tong or you're coming from Guav, you look up, you'll see a massive structure of rock that eroded. This is our pillar basalt, and in the dry season, you'll see that formation making its curves and dwindling through perseverance to the north and culminates. If anyone have ever been to Mclean, that is by the Grenada police station, take a drive up that road and go to where Nawasa has a big water plant up there. Then you'll see that majestic basalt rock that stands from the depth of our ocean, and that is what you may find if you go to Kikam Jenny. And that massive submarine volcano, that is the type of basement rocks that we would have there, and it projects itself onto the surface through geological processes of upliftment. So yeah.
So that's the area you did your PhD in.
Those are the areas that I did my PhD. But on leaving Grenada, when I left, as a part of what I thought I would have studied, but the place I went in Germany, it's a mountainous area in contrast to the university that's located in the north of Germany, closer to the coastline, where they may do petroleum geology. And so I specialize mainly in those type of exploration for mineral resources. Went to many African countries. So that is my background geological wise. Okay. And being outside there and different times in Grenada, our energy focus has been shifting. From my first coming back to Grenada for some time was between 2010 and 2013, when our chairman of the TWG at the moment, the Minister of Finance and Energy at that point in time, pulled me back to Grenada to take care of the renewable energy, and especially geothermal energy, another very important type of raw material or energy resource that is important for Grenada, that we work in parallel at this point in time with the quest of getting geothermal energy, as well as our oil and gas, which is offshore. So on land we have geothermal, offshore we have
let's just focus on we focus on what we're doing currently. We focus on that.
Well, of course, yeah. there are competing issues And so
Yeah,
we
I
got
understand. But let me just bring it Mr. Burke here. So, Mr. Burke, you are the head of the technical working group. And that's the group that has been put in place to drive the process.
close it.
What if you can tell
Yes.
us something about the group, its structure, its staffing, its mission? If you can tell us something about those things.
Yes. Well, let me start by just saying good evening to you, Mr. Layne, and good evening to your co-host, Ms. Mclean. Good evening to all of the viewers and listeners who are here with us tonight on this very important topic. We want to thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to speak about this because from where we sit, it's a very important initiative indeed. Um, I should perhaps say, first of all, that the technical working group was established back in October of 2023. At that time, in the throne speech by the Governor General, it was announced that the government would set up a special working group to look into the question as to whether or not Grenada does have commercially viable oil and gas potential. And if it does, to do something about it, to take all the necessary steps that would involve the exploration for oil and gas, the engagement of all of the necessary expertise that will be needed to identify and engage potential investors and partners, gather the geological, seismic and geological and geophysical information data that would be required to assess that prospectivity. And once that was done, to try to harvest that oil or gas, as it might be, um, for the patrimony of the nation, and to do so in an economically, environmentally, and socially responsible way. The mandate itself was a very extensive one because essentially it is saying, see whether Grenada has oil, and if it does, convert Grenada into an oil producing nation. So it's very extensive. And when that was done, the committee itself, the working group itself, of course, is a product of the cabinet of ministers. They set out the terms of reference. They appointed the team that would do the work. In terms of the work that it was going to do, it was quite extensive. If I may just mention quickly a couple of the things that we were asked to do, you would see that among those was the critical need um, for us to ensure that whatever we did, we must promote an environmentally friendly and socially responsible hydrocarbon development program in Grenada. We must get to know the hydrocarbon potential of Grenada's basins, estimate the monetary value and potential societal contributions of developing those hydrocarbon resources, attract credible partners, investors for exploration activities, prepare and update the legal instruments, the Petroleum Act regulations, the model production sharing contracts that would have to be utilized, the bidding instruments and tools that would be employed for bidding rounds that you would have to engage in if you had several partners expressing an interest, to prepare the local human capital and business to support and sustain the sector, to set up the institutional mechanisms and framework, the governance architecture that would support and guide the work that was going to be done, and overall to set up a hydrocarbon sector. So it's a very extensive area of work, and because the team itself was a very small team, I was asked to chair that body. Mr. Rodney George, an engineer by profession who has many, many years of experience working with electricity generation and has served as chairman of the board of Grenlec on several occasions. Very, very experienced man. He was made the deputy chair. Richard Duncan, who I think most people know here in Grenada, former accountant general, esteemed public servant, manager of the Grenada Cooperative Bank, has held very senior positions and now an advisor to the Ministry of Finance as a member. Solicitor General Siobhan Spencer Joseph as a member of that team as well to bring the legal side to some of the work. And of course, Dr. Raymond Nurse, as another member. So it's a very small team of people, and we do not have a staff as such. We do not have an office. We do not have a place where we meet. We do not have any working physical institutional structure from which we operate. This body, essentially, the 4 or 5 people I mentioned here, has been doing all of this work digitally, electronically, meeting, exchanging, talking, sharing, engaging. And our first mission really.
Have you engaged consultants because I take it outside of Dr. Doss, none of you have technical knowledge in the area, in the particular area. So have you engaged any consultants?
Yes, well, that is precisely the point I was coming to, which is
Awesome.
because none of us has any experience or expertise. I served as a minister of energy, but of course, that's a very, you might say, oversight, a very supervisory kind of function. Yeah. But none of us has the experience of outside of Gallo himself, of any technical expertise in the area. And from what we were able to
Uh,
discern, the
I don't want to
work.
interrupt you, but I wonder if you could just raise the camera a bit so it'd be more. Let me see.
This way,
Yes, I think
yeah,
that's yes.
right,
That is.
yeah. So from what we were able to discern, the work itself, you might say, fell into 5 broad categories. Yeah, one was the legal stuff, contract. If we had contracts, resolve them. The legal and regulatory work that was going to be done, ongoing legal support that had to be undertaken, issues relating to boundary delimitation, maritime boundary limitation, and treaties that we may have entered into with countries. So a lot of stuff relating to the law and the legal work. And we needed someone, a petroleum lawyer, who had that kind of experience and expertise to work with us on that. Then, of course, you had the technical dimension of the work. The technical work really having to do with the geological work, the geophysical work, the data protection, getting the data that we spoke about, licensing that data, setting up a data library, ensuring that we can negotiate with the seismic companies that were going to come into the country and take that kind of scan, those kinds of scans that were being done to interpret the data, because it is that data, it is the interpretation, analysis of the content and quality of that data that will tell us, that will lead us to the prospectivity for oil and gas, to determine our prospectivity. So the technical side represented one other pillar of the work that had to be taken on in addition to the legal. The third broad area had to do with the commercial side. In other words, if you were to find something or you determine that there was something there, engaging now partners, identifying credible partners who can work with us, negotiating a relationship with them, determining what instruments you would use, what contractual philosophy you're going to employ as a nation in order to be able to engage these partners. Do you do private negotiations one-on-one? Do you set up a bidding round? If so, how is that going to be organized? Who is going to prepare the tools to get that done? And so on, identifying the partners and managing the licensing rounds and the tendering process that will generally govern that commercial relationship of which Grenada must have a share. So that's
I
a
think
third.
the commercial part will come after we settle that. Listen, there are quantities of oil, quantities
Commercially
of
viable,
gas.
yes.
Yes,
Commercially
I think the
sustainable,
commercial side will come
commercially
after.
viable quantities, yes. But I should just mention here that you can't wait until everything is done before you do that step. So you
Indeed,
have to be sort of
indeed.
walking slower in that
Mhm.
area, but you have to be walking while you're
Yes.
doing the other things, yeah? So
So
you have the legal, you have the technical, you have the commercial, yeah? And then, of course, you have the environmental, what we're calling broadly social and environmental responsibility, because we have to ensure that even if you discover that you had what was commercially viable, it was going to be extracted, exploited, developed, and produced in a very responsible way. Yeah.
mhm.
Because, as you know, our country depends very heavily on fishing. We depend very heavily on tourism. Both of these industries are closely connected to what is now called the blue economy, and therefore we can't recklessly just decide that we are going to drill. For example, you can't say I'm going to drill around Kikum. You can say that the areas that are identified as marine protected areas to protect our fish, our marine life, and to ensure that it is sustainable, where that lobsters, turtles, and all the other marine creatures function and live and breed and regenerate. You have to ensure that that is taken care of, so
And
that
I was
having
wondering, I was just wondering if you can, if you are allowed to disclose to us who are the particular experts, so those during
yes,
the program could have an
yes,
idea of
yes.
the quality of people
We
who are
are.
involved.
We are. If you just allow me, though, I'll just mention one, the final, what I consider to be the final dimension of the work, and that is capacity building. Yeah. Knowledge transfer, workforce development, ensuring that as we train, as we do this, Grenada itself develop the human stock to support the industry itself. Yeah. And so these are the broad areas that we're trying to cover. I mention these because it means that to do the work that we are being asked to do, we must identify experts in each and every area that I just mentioned to support our work. Yeah. And we have, in fact, been able to recruit experts for all of that work. On the legal side, we have supporting us Mr. Richard Beckles, a well established and well known petroleum lawyer from Trinidad and Tobago. We have on the technical side, geological and geophysical, Miss Helena Innes, again from Trinidad and Tobago. And we have with us as well our lead consultant, Dr. Gilbert Yevi, from the state of Benin, who is the overall consultant. So he has a team of people working with him, geologists, reservoir engineers, petroleum engineers, geophysicists, and commercial people as well. Fiscal economists, all looking at, well, I shouldn't say fiscal economists, petroleum economists, um, all looking at analyzing that data, its quality, and helping us to develop the instruments that we would need for that relationship. So that team, led by Dr. Yevi, it's a broad group of people that come, some of them based in Benin, some based in Texas, and some based in Edinburgh, Scotland. Yeah. So that's a team. And then, of course, on the commercial side, Dr. Yevi's team is also helping with that work. On the environmental side, we are just in the process now of recruiting the environmental expert. Yeah. I will speak in a little bit about a recent initiative we had here all of this week. But that work too, developing, assessing the environmental and social impact and developing the strategies to mitigate those impacts are extremely important. Yeah. Um, in addition to those, we are also working on the knowledge transfer side, and we have um, Mr. Anthony Paul from Trinidad and Tobago working with us on this. We have a human resource consultant, uh, recruitment, as well as general facilitation of the workshops and the other program that we did. Miss Lisa James and Associates from Trinidad and Tobago. She helps us to develop, to recruit, to prepare the terms of reference for the experts, to receive and screen the expressions of interest that come in, to develop the methodology and criteria for evaluation during the interviewing process, to assist us in the conduct of these interviews, and to ensure that we do all that is necessary there. We were very fortunate also, as we started work, to receive a number of expressions of goodwill from several persons who are not interested in working with Grenada as such, but simply want to help. People who are experts, subject matter experts in their own right, have worked or are working in many other countries and many other companies who said, listen, I just want to contribute, I just want to help. Some of them spoke to us, to me directly. Some of them spoke to Dr. Nurse directly, using his contacts in Germany and Eastern Europe generally, and Africa, to bring together persons who were willing to help. Some of them spoke directly to the Prime Minister, who simply said, I have something that I can help you with. So what we did as a result of this was to establish a voluntary group of subject matter experts. And that group of subject matter experts, we meet routinely with them as well. We hear from them. They join the interview panels when we interview people, so that we have the benefit of their expertise and recommendations. Things that we have doubts about, we put to them and get their recommendations. So this work involves, even though it's a very small group of people constituting the technical working group as such, our tentacles are far and wide. And we have engaged a number of people across the board to assist us in the work that we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, question?
Yeah, so I wanted to say to Mr. Burke, thank you so much for jumping into the makeup of the body. But Mr. Burke and Dr. Nurse, I think I want to take us back to something very fundamental, right? Because we talk about oil and gas, but can we get an explanation of what is the difference? What is oil? What is gas? And how important is it for us to have this differentiation?
You're muted.
Dr. Nurse, you're muted.
You have to unmute.
Just before I answer or make a response to this one, the chairman had forgotten, I guess, to mention our project coordinator, the most important person at the moment, who is connecting all the dots and all the moving parts, and that is a very young Grenadian, that youth is working very hard and very diligent, responding very quickly and timely with the immense amount of workload that he has. And his name is Ryan Andrews, you know.
Yes,
so
yes,
he's really playing a very key role at the moment in putting things together. And
he's a Grenadian, right? He's Grenadian.
He is Grenadian. He's actually from your region.
Okay.
You know, so homeboy, a homie.
Okay.
Yeah, so with respect now to the question of this resource that we call petroleum, we call hydrocarbons, we call fossil fuel, different literature, different scenarios would highlight why we give this resource that name. So the name petroleum, or the term petroleum, is derived from the Greek language. And it simply means rock oil. Okay? So that is what petroleum would mean, rock oil. And it was actually well formulated and dealt with one of these Germans, besides Alexander von Humboldt, actually a miner called Geologist Agricola. And the university that I actually went to and still operate in, our motto of that university is derived from this brethren or this German scientist called Geologist Agricola, and it simply is the motto indeed with any raw material is theory con praxis. So that this was formulated since in 1546. So to differentiate between these hydrocarbons, there are a lot of differentiating factors and similarities. So I will just try to be as brief as possible without going into too many technical details. So we can differentiate these oil and gas in a general sense, as we refer to hydrocarbons or petroleum, based on one, the composition. And that would simply mean the chemical composition. For the listeners and anyone who have done organic chemistry, this would be one of the decisive factor of how we can differentiate between these two resources. The oil or crude oil has the properties that it is liquid is a liquid mixture of hydrocarbons, and that would mean it has between the carbon molecules, C5 to as much as C3540. So that will give you the heavy crude. And there are names like or terms like alkanes, cycloalkanes, aromatic hydrocarbon. These are some of the properties of the crude oil or oil itself. And there are, of course, impurities such as sulfur, nitrogen, and other metals that you can find in that construction under wherever this deposit is from. So the key elements here that differentiate the oil from the gas is the total amount of carbon molecules that is present, ranging from C5 to C3540 hydrocarbon. In contrast, natural gas is light with respect to the amount of carbon atoms that you have. So you have very basic like methane, CH4. So, and also other lighter gas like propane, butane, and other gases of the like that have also another characteristic of how these material is worked on, or even the physical state of oil and gas. What does that mean? How the formation is under high temperatures and pressure, and what is the reason for having so much of this in different parts of the world? These are the remains of dead plants and animals over millions of years. So we're not talking about something that happened yesterday. We are talking about things that happened over 600 millions of years to modern times. And so our situation in Grenada or in the Caribbean, and especially in the Grenada Basin, because Grenada is formed in a relatively young period according to the geological time frame, which extends from over 500 million years and more from the Precambrian, comes up onto what we call in our period.
So Gano, John, and the person that speak, tell me to summarize it right. Oil will be oily, liquid, the oily liquid stuff. The gas will be light and vaporous.
Exactly. Okay, so those are just one or two of the criteria for differentiation, but there are others that are very important to mention. So, for example,
we just wanted basic. We just wanted a basic level.
Well, let me just give you two more differentiating criteria. Like, for example, the formation and extraction of the oil or from the natural gas itself. So we can get the oil in reservoirs as well as the natural gas. Sometimes they occur separately, sometimes they occur both together. So you can find them coexisting. And the question is, when they coexist like this, and we want to get them out of the area where we are looking for due to exploration in the upstream part of the whole process, and then downstream is where we're going to make that differentiation with respect to the refining processes. So the natural gas, we can simply do that by simply separating some of the impurities like CO2, water, sulfur, and that would give us the methane and the series of other gases that are related. In contrast to the crude oil, we have a chemical process called fractional distillation, where we be producing chemical conversion for gasoline, for diesel, for jet fuel, and for other uses. Importantly is the question, why do we want oil or gas? We want oil and gas basically for the uses. We want gas because it is important for electricity generation, and it is also important for fertilizers. In contrast to the oil,
you're speaking about, I guess, why the world needs it. But I think
Absolutely.
Grenada really,
Everyone needs it
I
generally
think
at this
Grenada,
point in time.
I think Grenada really needed because it would be a serious economic resource for us that we could sell and finance all of the country needs.
Well, these are
That's where
some
we
of
are.
the
So I
importance
want to
of
ask you
why
this
we are
question.
exploring at the moment.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you, and it's also as far as you are aware, I know it's all in the process, but I have any source been identified as yet, so we could say yes, we know that at least in this area, that area, there is oil and gas which potentially can be commercially exploited. Even though we don't know the whole picture yet, are we sufficiently confident based on things that exist? For example, we know Trinidad, then Venezuela, and so on and so forth. Are we sufficiently confident that this effort is worth the while?
Yes, I think it is safe to say that. Yeah. You just mentioned that you know we are evidently geographically speaking, we are in a proven hydrocarbon rich region. Yeah. We share the same continental shelf with Trinidad and Tobago, with Venezuela, with Suriname, with Guyana. Yeah. And I mean, these countries are literally 90 miles away.
Yes.
So they have identified and established and are beyond doubt oil producing countries. Yeah. They have petroleum systems that have been developed, and our basins are right there. It is not likely that, oil and gas, hydrocarbon does not respect geological boundaries. It wouldn't say, well, I'm only dealing with Trinidad, and then where the boundary line end, I'm giving Grenada nothing. Yeah. It's not like that. So there is good reason to believe that we too have petroleum systems. And so the preliminary work that has been done, the seismic surveys that have been collected, and there have been quite a few of them, seem to be suggesting that there are traces of hydrocarbon in our region. So far, only one well has been drilled. Yeah, that well is known as the Nutmeg well. It was drilled by the Global Petroleum Group, the Russian company that has a contract with Grenada. And from what we have been able to determine, based on the analysis of that information that we have available to us, because we don't have all of it, our experts are working with data that they have collected from a seismic company called TGS. They're working with data from a company called GeoX, two seismic companies that have done quite extensive work. Um, we are also working closely with Trinidad and Tobago. We're just about to sign a data use agreement with them where they will provide us with some data as well. That appears to data that would straddle both sides of the maritime boundary, so to say, so that we can then in turn analyze how we might use that information to further improve our understanding of our own terrain, and then of course the well that was done by the Russians, we are now trying to get the well data in our discussions and negotiations with the Russians. So, but what I can say with some certainty is that the information that is presently available to us from that well will tend to suggest that there are some traces of hydrocarbon. What is now left to be done in relation to that well is, of course, to have the appraisal done, an appraisal well. So first you do an exploration well where you drill a well, and then you do an appraisal to determine what quantities are likely to exist there.
Well, I would also to add to what Nas have just uttered, spoken about, the experts have been able to look at wells and fields and internationally, worldwide, and find analog situations to what we have here in our basin. And through these studies, literature, as well as the practical working in some of these regions, it highlights that from the comparisons of these different analogs worldwide, that there are great potential in our
High
area.
probability, and we also have.
So again, in order to verify all these indicators that we have derived from the numerous seismic activity, and this seismic activity, but the seismic research that has been done, the scanning that has been done in our ocean, and those from our regional neighbors, as well as the data from wells that have been drilled by Trinidad, Venezuela, Guyana, and others. And of course, if we can get the one well that was drilled in our basin, that would give us better information, more data. The more data you receive is better for us in order to characterize and to look at the volume dimension of what our resources are. So the potential is quite high at the moment. There were traces of natural gas in one of the wells that was drilled. We can't say anything more because we need to appraise that. When you're doing geological exploration, one little pin, like you press this pen and you have one point here. We have a whole area. Think about the size of Grenada's maritime space.
So that's what I want to come to know.
Okay.
How do we determine A, the size of our maritime space? What's the formula that is used? And B, the boundary. Because we have small island, we have neighbors pretty close by. So how do we determine that? That's a suspect more question for you, and Gallo can also.
Yes. Well, the thing is, there's an international commission or agency that deals with the law of the sea, yeah, and basically sort of determines, broadly speaking, what areas of the sea belong to countries or are associated or could be associated with countries, and what areas are just international waters that don't belong to anybody at all. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And each country is allotted an exclusive economic zone around its country, around the territory. Yeah. And then, of course, the rest of it is sort of international. Those boundaries, even though that principle exists, those boundaries are not determined and marked out as between many different countries. Yeah. In order to do that, some countries have to basically get experts, cartographers, hydrographers, who would go in and do all the measurements and mark the points and determine where the boundaries actually run. You can have an imaginary line as to where it's running, but you don't have a clear, marked out, delimited area to say this is exactly where the boundary is. And not all countries belong to that international body. For example, Venezuela is not a member of that body. So that, not everyone will submit or subject itself. Not every country will subject itself or submit to the rules that govern that country if they have not signed on to the treaty and are not members. So sometimes you have to engage in individual negotiations, country to country negotiations. Yeah, left to the other process, it's long, it's time consuming, and sometimes never gets done. Where there is political will and countries have good relationships, they can determine that they want to delimit their boundaries, irrespective of using the UN system to do it. Yeah. That is what happened, for example, with Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada. We decided, let us mark out our boundaries based on what we know. And in 2012, Trinidad hired some experts. We hired some experts. Those experts met over time with cartographers and so on, the lawyers, and finally, once they had mapped out the area, the ministers of government, the cabinet came together, and then a treaty was signed between the two countries. Yeah, so you have a maritime boundary delimitation marked out, and a treaty to accept where the boundary runs and how the boundary runs as between the countries. Yeah, we have not managed as yet to do that with Venezuela. We have not managed as yet to do that with St. Vincent. Yeah. And we consider this to be an important step, because if you're going to say that Grenada, as we mentioned before, Grenada's land mass is 344 square kilometers. Grenada's maritime acreage, as we now assess it, is 28,800 square kilometers. So think about how much larger our sea space is compared to the 344 square kilometers.
That's about 81 times.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
And therefore,
how could we say that when we have not delimited with St. Vincent, we have not delimited with...
based on the imaginary lines that are drawn that I was speaking about a little bit earlier.
Okay,
yeah? In other words, the exact boundaries will be determined, but you have a sense of where your economic zones are and how the boundary is likely to run. Yeah.
Okay, that's based on the 200-mile principle?
I'm sorry?
Is that based on the 200-mile principle? Because I was just thinking.
Yes.
I was just thinking, but Trinidad is right next door, so we wouldn't get that 200 miles in relation.
No, but they have, you see, but then they have median lines, yeah? In other words, where the countries do not have, where 200 miles don't separate them, that is exactly what happens. You'll have an imaginary median line running through, and that's what the experts come in.
And that's what we work with. Okay.
Yeah.
So with regard to St. Vincent and Venezuela, with regard to St. Vincent and Venezuela,
it's an equidistant principle that they employ.
All right, good. So it will just be a matter of now of actually determining and by treaty agreeing that this is the line we accept, this is the boundary.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what has to happen. Yeah. So if you were to be doing that using using the international system, it may take a long time. Countries may not agree and so on. But if the politicians can agree, they can set out, bring in the experts, do the measurements, see how the expedition lines runs, and then agree this is what we're doing as a boundary, and they make that a treaty between the countries. Yeah. Okay. So we want to do the same thing with Venezuela, and we want to do the same thing with Trinidad. In 2012, we concluded the agreement with Trinidad and Tobago. We want to do that now with St. Vincent and Venezuela. And with that in mind, our Prime Minister has put a proposal to the Venezuelan government and to the Vincentian government for the establishment of a joint trilateral commission made up of 10 persons, 3 from each of the countries, and a 10th person that will be the chairperson of the commission, that will be from another country, a country other than the 3 countries, to chair the body and to negotiate. Each side will have their experts and to negotiate the boundaries. That is important because you correctly pointed out, you can't say you're going to lease out land to somebody if you don't know where your boundary is. And the same way you can't lease out maritime acreage to somebody, to companies that coming in to get blocks to lease and to explore if you don't know where the boundaries are. So delimiting the boundaries is an important step going forward as well.
Mr. Burke, in mentioning Venezuela and boundaries, I am very aware that Venezuela and Guyana has an ongoing territorial dispute with regards to boundaries that were delineated years ago and agreed upon, right? maybe it's bold of me to ask this question, but what safeguards will be put in place to ensure that agreements made at this juncture or any juncture in the future are safeguarded from us coming back in the future when it is that the industry is booming, that certain persons or certain parties may not necessarily agree on the settled boundaries to avoid another territorial dispute in the region?
Yes, I mean it's a very important question, but one that we cannot pretend to have any particular answer to
Mm-hmm.
because people break rules all the time. People disregard contracts all the time. People
Mm-hmm.
disregard treaties all the time, and develop the narrative that they want to develop to justify the conduct that they
Mm-hmm.
decide to embark on, the course of action they decide to embark upon. Yeah, so. It is difficult to say why people do things. If you remember, a war was started in the Falkland Islands that led to a lot of deaths and a lot of destruction over something exactly like this. And it can happen anywhere
Yeah.
because people will find a reason why they don't have to comply with the treaty that was signed years ago. Yeah. So there is no total safeguard that you can put in
Mm-hmm.
place as such. You try to do it and you hope that people would let good sense and respect for the rule of law,
Prevail.
especially international law, prevail.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burke. I do want to take some comments and questions from the audience. So, if you would allow me. So, we have Angela Eunice Knight. She always tunes in. She was just saying good evening from Barbados and encouraging other persons to listen. We have Lennox Charles. He says, good night, everyone. Tonight's take is interestingly educational, enlightening, and he said petroleum. We also have Bob. He says, my dear friend Gallo and GBSS lifelong buddy, I will interject from time to time during the course of the program. We have John Calise. John says, good night, Comrade Gallo and Nazim. He also said, good night to myself and Comrade Layne, good night. Bob further comments, the UN Convention determines maritime space. And he says that today that is done by satellites. I think he was referring to the boundaries, yes. They can tell you the coordinates of your boundary. John says, how long can we expect to see some real production and how far away from the boundaries can another country set up drilling rigs? And then Bob, his comment is, sometimes the boundaries intersect like the North Sea, where drilling is shared between UK and Norway. They share the spoils.
Yes,
I
I
guess
think
all of that will be
the two,
determined by treaty, by
yes, the
treaty
2 points there that
concluded.
are quite important and the contributors are quite correct. Bob, especially, I think you've raised some very important points there that now it's done by satellite. That is correct. And of course, you also point out that sometimes the boundaries intersect. So the thing about it is that where the boundaries intersect, again, where and the goodwill is there, countries enter into what are called joint development zone agreements. So if it's determined that resources straddle both sides of the border, once it's determined, once it's marked and agreed upon, and there's oil or gas there, the countries may decide, listen, let's get into an agreement that we will take that out jointly and share the spoils, share the cost of doing it, and share the spoils from it. We were actually in the process of concluding such an agreement with Trinidad and Tobago back in 2012 before the government changed. A draft joint development zone agreement had already been exchanged between the two countries, and then that was put on ice once the government changed. But it is something which is very likely to come up again because we have signed a framework agreement with Trinidad that makes provisions for things like that. And what is now about to be done is that a steering committee comprised of 3 members from each country will constitute a body that will basically be driving that cooperation program, including the development of any joint exploration activity and production activity. should we find that there's a hydrocarbon straddling the boundary between the two countries?
There was a question or maybe a statement from John Calise with respect to when are we going to get the first drop of that sacred liquid that we are looking for, or gas. And we must understand that there's a long process before we can get it. So like we are in the exploration phase, that is upstream. And work has been done with the seismic activities, the keep saying activities, but what we have done, or the seismic companies have done a lot of work which are now being interpreted by our experts in Scotland. So that is just one aspect, and that can take up to 3 years when you identify from the seismic results, etc. And you drill, like we have had that one well being dug or drilled by GPG, the Nutmeg well. So after you drill one well, at least you have to appraise that well to make checks and balances, whether it gives you what you're looking for. And also, one well alone is generally not enough, depending on the size of the area in which you are working. So that again will take another year once you have done it well and you have the necessary capital to continue the finances to do the work plan that you would derive. And the appraisal could go up to 3 years, depending, and knowing the fact that our resource lies seemingly very deep in contrast to some of the other resources from our neighbors. So then, imagine we do it right, we do the appraisal, we analyze and we get all the volumetrics and all that is necessary that it takes now to go commercial and to produce. So that is another 3 to 5 years. And we produce then after maybe year 5, year 6, depending on how fast, how efficient we work with the resource and with the finance, capital, the technologies that we have. Because sometimes you may have all this 100%, but you cannot recover as much as maybe 20%, depending on how that is logged in the different rock structures, where we have, again, different processes that take place in the formation of these type of resources. We need certain conditions. But imagine we get it right with all these preliminary geological, petrological, and the geophysics, geochemistry, all the geosciences is involved in this whole process, and the whole question of the reservoir technology that would be implemented. So by, say, we do it right and everything is favorable, 5 to 7 years down the road, but then we still have to produce and understand the flow rate of the resource, be it oil or be it gas. So a lot of work is continuously being done.
We could be talking 8 to 10 years then.
We can put it as a mean average.
8 to 10 years. Let's just take a break 1 second, 1 minute again, just to recognize the sponsor of the program. Gel Professional Solutions, Frank. Gem FM carried this program on FM out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAL.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes, let me just ask this question again. I suspect Naz, it's more for you. Has any determination been made as to the minimum value of the minimum value of the oil and gas that would make this entire project viable, worth the while, as the case may be. I know sometimes you hear an assessment is done that Venezuela has so much $1 trillion, $10 trillion value in gas. Iran has so much, Guyana has so much. Has any assessment been made, any determination as to what is the minimum value of the stuff we get out of the ground that would make all of this work that you folks are doing and that has to be done commercially viable?
No, we don't have, no, I think the answer to that question is no. We don't have some sort of minimum value that would make it viable. Yeah. Because, until you do that appraisal, you wouldn't really be able to know, what's there. You wouldn't be able to know even what's there, what amount of it can be easily extracted. You wouldn't be able to know what new technologies are emerging that would make it easier or more difficult to do it as time progresses. So I don't think we can sit here today and make a projection of a number that would say, well, look, once you get this minimum number, then you can do it.
Mr. Burke, if I may, I know that, for example, when Guyana initiated their venture in terms of determining whether or not they could have been an oil producing country, they would have teamed up with a lot of experts. And I know you mentioned some, but particularly I wanted to speak about the oil producing giants like Exxon or any of those companies. Have they been involved in any way so far in what we've been doing?
Yes, well, the answer is yes, in the sense that when you get the seismics done, yeah, the seismic companies go out and they do the seismic surveys. They then sub-license that data to the oil companies. The oil companies pay to get copies of that data. The government enters into an agreement with the seismic company under which it will get a share of the monies that are paid by the oil companies to the seismic company. When the oil company gets that information or purchases that information, it does its own assessment of the quality of the information. And based on its assessment, it will then approach the government to say, I want to lease this block, or I want to lease that block, or I want to lease that block. Yeah. So that process is now underway. We know based on the conversations that we've had with our seismic companies that several companies have purchased Grenada's data. We are just about to conclude agreements with both GeoX and TGS that will involve sharing information. We already know how much money we are to collect even now from one of the companies already once the agreement is signed. The companies then will approach the government. Now, as it presently stands, we are on the verge of conversations with BP, Shell, CNOOC, the Chinese oil company. So conversations are going. Conversations are ongoing. And they have the data. They're analyzing the data from their own standpoint, and they will approach the government with what proposals they have for a particular block or blocks that they wish to lease and do their own exploitation.
Well, let me see if I get that clear. There are presently seismic research taking place, or maybe it has already taken place by independent companies. They have the data. They are sharing the data with the government of Grenada.
Yes, we have copies of the data.
Okay, and also these companies that ExxonMobil, Mobil, for example, which have the resources, uh, they have also purchased the data from these seismic research bodies.
Yes.
And then they
And
will use the data to make a determination as to whether they want to get into this or not.
yes, and which particular blocks they might be interested in.
Right,
Then they
because
come to the government with a
they come to
proposal
the
saying,
government.
I want to lease this block or that block or this block because I see something here that looks exciting. Or the
Okay,
government sets up a bidding round where it says, look, we have these blocks. We're inviting all of the oil companies to come in and take a look, take a show, see what's going on. And basically have the companies bid for the blocks. So you can have a bidding round where the companies bid for the blocks. They put in tenders for the blocks, or you can have direct negotiations between the government and an individual company that wants to buy or lease a particular block, particular
right. And
blocks.
a company leases a block, for example, then we will have an arrangement with them,
A
in terms,
contract.
a contract with them in terms of how any any benefit, all the benefits are allocated. If it turns out that they conclude that there are commercially viable sources in that
Yes,
particular area they have
yes,
leased. Now,
yes.
let me ask. It's the seismic companies, seismic research bodies, I think GPG, CPG is one, Global
No,
G,
JPG is
another
a
one.
is an operator, is a well, in principle, is an oil producing company. So
Okay.
it is not the one doing the seismic surveys. It is using the seismics to say, I am now going to develop this block
So, right.
and
So
produce oil in this block.
when do they
Hmm?
start in this process?
I'm sorry?
When do they start in this process? GPG, Global Petroleum Company,
Yes.
they are what?
It's a company that entered into an agreement with the government of Grenada back in 2007
Mhm.
that they were going to explore and develop oil and gas in Grenada. Um, there were a number of missteps as far as we were concerned. They signed some agreements with the former government. Those agreements were not realistic or enforceable from what we could have determined. And nothing happened between 2008 and 2013. And then in 2013, they entered into new agreements with the government, the new government that changed. And they now have a license to develop 4 blocks, the D blocks, in Grenada's waters. It is in one of those 4 blocks that they've dug the well. They signed the production sharing agreement that requires them to do drill wells, to do appraisals, and if they, based on what they find in the appraisals, to have a field development plan. In other words, the physical infrastructure that will now require to do to extract the oil from the fields. Yeah. So exploration, um, assessment of quantities, and then a development plan to develop that, which has to be approved, of course, by the government. And it is at that time too that government, in the production sharing agreement, government will determine what share it's going to have out of the what returns it's going to have out of the development process.
But they own,
Generally speaking, it is the companies who spend money, not the government.
yeah.
But as a general rule, it is in the industry, the company will first try to recover its expenditure before the government gets to share what's there, basically.
So, but their rights are only limited to only a certain area. That's what you say?
Yes. Grenada's acreage is presently divided into or articulated into 44 blocks. They have 4 blocks. They're known as the D blocks. They're designated as the D blocks. You have the C blocks, you have the B blocks, you have the A blocks, and so on. So those 4 blocks are very close to the Trinidad-Venezuela border, and it is in one of those blocks that the Nutmeg well was drilled.
Okay, so therefore we'll have freedom of action with regard to the other 40 blocks. That's what you said?
I'm sorry?
We'll have freedom to
Yes, of
engage
course. Yes,
others with regard
yes,
to,
yes,
so for
yes,
example, yeah,
yes.
okay.
I mean, this is our strategy at this point in time after our experts advise that we would work parallel. We would work with what we have at the moment that is on the operation by the operator. And because we have a wide acreage, then we'll definitely
Yes.
have to look into the next 2/3 and more of the blocks that we have or the acreage that we have that hasn't been drilled and stuff like that. So we would work parallel.
Yeah. A concern that for Express is, and I know you mentioned it at the start, not specifically, but you what you said touches and concerns it. Namely, put it this way, a pretty crude way. Uh, Grenada's Beach, Bathway, would they be affected by this process that we are undertaking to develop this industry?
Well, think we have had a stakeholders meeting this week or last week where we were actually had many different stakeholders, direct and indirectly, that could be impacted positively or maybe even negatively should things go a bit off key in the exploration and production of oil and gas. And a number of threats were highlighted. For example, individuals were very concerned, like everyone would be concerned about oil spills. Others are concerned about the impact of the industry on fishery and other marine activities. And so others are even thinking about that maybe we can, because we are in a volcanic zone, that we can trigger seismic activities, etc., through drilling processes. But that is exactly why we are here. We all brought the experts here this week in order to get these concerns of all the possible impacts that the oil industry or the oil and gas exploration could have on various entities. And in order to mitigate, of course, we must carry out EIAs and SIAs, and these are things that would definitely be taken into consideration in order to combat any of the activities that may lead to one of these threats.
And the
Yeah, I
EIA being
just
an environmental impact assessment and the SIA is social impact assessment.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, guys,
yeah,
you
I think
finished?
just to mention here as a follow-up to what Galu is saying, the exercise that we did here on Wednesday and Thursday was quite extensive in that regard. So, you know, months ago we planned that we will write to all of the organizations from Nawasa to Grenlec to Ministry of Tourism, Southern Fishermen's Association, everybody's at Bureau of Standards. So all of these bodies were invited to a full day workshop where they came and we spend the day with them, hearing from them all of the concerns that they have. Those who support, those who are ambivalent, those who are in doubt, and we harvested all of the concerns, all of the questions, the concerns, oppositions, wherever they came from. And then the following day on Thursday, we spent the entire day mapping those concerns. In other words, putting them into some framework that would say, okay, these are the categories of complaints that we have. These are the groups from which they came. So that when we develop and design the strategy, and the environmental strategy and social impacts strategy, they will take into account the concerns that people have and the ways in which they can they can they can affect us. From Friends of the Earth to Specto, everybody was there, right? So we harvested all of those, and we really want to ensure that we don't do something that will impact on people without hearing first from them. So that exercise is extremely important, and it is, the basic inputs into what will constitute the environmental strategy.
Okay. Well, I guess we don't have laws or regulations on the books, which in a very robust manner, I will say, engage this process. In other words, we don't have laws on the books that contemplated the drilling of oil and the oil industry. Am I correct in saying so?
No, there's some.
The pieces
The
of
thing is that
legislation here that are needed.
they are outdated,
Yeah,
and when they were developed, they were done in haste,
right.
without for the convenience, in some cases, of one particular partner, without looking at the much wider picture of what these things might mean for Grenada. Yeah. So
Right.
all of these laws are now under review, and what we are seeking to do is to upgrade all of these laws and regulations, so as to ensure that they meet international standards.
Will there be a
Um,
process of consultation with regard to the upgrading, rewriting, or whatever is determined to be the best approach with regard to these laws and
yes,
regulations?
yes, it will come to that. Yeah, the lawyers were at the workshops as well to take into account some of those concerns. Now, that workshop
And then the
is only
lawyers being the
one.
drafters.
Yes. No, well, I don't want, yeah, the lawyers, yeah, the ones who are working with us to update the laws, put it like
Oh,
that.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah. The lawyers
Understood.
who work with us to update the laws. Yeah. So they were at the workshop as well. So, we're trying to capture as much concerns as possible. Now, when the laws are updated and drafted, they will have to go, again, we'll have consultations on them, and then they will have to be put before the parliament. They'll have to be put before other interest groups, the bar association, and other stakeholders who would be able to make an input into these laws. Will also have an opportunity to address them. Yeah.
Mr.
Um,
One of
Burke.
the, I'm sorry, go on, please.
Oh, sorry. I think I'll allow you to finish your thought, but I have a question in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals and us now going into a fossil fuel and oil, and how does that intertwine? But I'll allow you to finish your comment, and then I'll ask my question properly. And I think Dr. Nurse would be able to help as well with this question.
Yeah. Well, no, I think I can stop there. I was about to say something relating to um, skills development,
Okay.
training, and so on, but I
yeah,
can
I
leave
think
that
that
in the
fits in with what
conversation.
Aisha was about to ask. What's
Yes.
Aisha?
So
I'm sorry?
perhaps. So I know by 2030, one of the sustainable development goals is to aim to ensure that we have affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for use by all persons. And I know Grenada also aims to fulfill the sustainable development goals. So now I wonder, are we planning as a nation to utilize the income received from producing oil, hopefully, to help with greener initiatives in terms of green energy and anything of that sort? What is being put in place, or has that not been considered as yet?
No, it has been considered. The truth is that, people raise this issue all the time, that how can Grenada be speaking about sustainable development and low carbon development on one side of its mouth, so to say, and at the same time saying they want to do oil and gas development. That these two things are inimical to each other. These two things can go hand in hand. And we have to remind people that the two things can go hand in hand and should go hand in hand. Because while we support the idea of low carbon development, while we support the idea, while we understand the climate threat, while we would like to see the planet preserved, and we expect to pursue mitigation measures and adaptation measures to ensure that the planet survives, we ought to understand and accept that green development, low carbon development must be financed. Somebody has to finance it. It is not enough to simply say that we're going to convert all our vehicles into electrical vehicles if nobody has the money to do it, or to do solar if nobody has the money to do it, or to discard the use of heavy fuel, fossil fuel, if nobody has the means to do it. And the funding mechanisms, the Green Development Fund, the climate funds that have been identified, and for which pledges have been made by some of the developed countries, the funding mechanisms, a lot of what happens is that they remain as pledges, less than what is actually pledged. And even where monies are put into those funds, accessing those funds is proving to be a serious problem for many of the smaller economies. Yeah, so that we cannot just say that we're going to do it when we have no means to do it. And the way that we view oil and gas development is that we must get the resources. If we have that reserve, if we have that resource, we must develop it. We must exploit it in an environmentally and socially responsible way. We must get the revenues from it, and we must use that revenue as transition funding to then pursue low carbon development. In other words, the oil and gas development program is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. So it has been considered.
If I may also add a bit to this as well. We have declared or postulated around 2011 a low carbon strategy of how to develop Grenada, and we came up with what we call the Grenada Vision 2020-2030. And that has spelled out that by 2020, 2025, we should have been green already. Today, we shouldn't be talking anything. We have been green. And I remember that we were so forcefully pushing that line that at the IRENA itself, the International Renewable Energy Agency, which came to Grenada and we did gap analysis and all that was necessary, a renewable readiness assessment, and to position Grenada to go green, fully green. But we also had in that energy policy also a clause or another aspect of our development where the hydrocarbon was also part of that process. And so in order for us to facilitate the green development, we are also concentrating of how we can get the resources necessary, the financial, the funding that would have been derived from the oil and gas in order to balance off and leverage that whole question of going green. And I did a study with one university in Berlin, the Rainer Limon University, and they are known in Germany as the father of renewable energy because they postulated, many of the scientists at that university, the whole question of the solar. And we came up with a whole pamphlet about 20-something different barriers that inhibit the speed of transition into the renewable energy situation. And we actually did that. But one of these postgraduate students, he was working for Grenada at the time and came to do an internship to analyze these situations and came up with analyses so that and it was specifically for Grenada. We also had what we had signed a memorandum of understanding with a number of top German companies that are responsible for every stage of the energy branch. You know, we did all of this, and we recognize till today that we are stalling based on the fact that the funding is not there. Geothermal sites have been identified in Grenada, and all that is necessary. They are in a similar situation where they have to do test drilling, like we have to do test drilling offshore. And what is happening there is also a question of the funds that are not available for us to push that green energy and to make Grenada as green as we want. So the balancing off has to be dealt with by some way, or simply, if individuals are saying that we should keep our fossil fuel where they are at the moment, we also need to understand the quantity, the volume of what we have, so that we can actually say, pay us to keep it there, but we have to know what we have. If we don't know what we have, as Naz correctly said at the beginning, you're selling a piece of land and you don't know the boundaries, etc., and the value of your land. So this is why it's very important for us to go and work together and build the synergies with all our energy resources that are indigenous, that is ours, that is the patrimony of the Grenadian people.
Naz, as you know, a concern will be that not only in Grenada but in the region, there's many times a compliance deficit. Because we have standards and so, but there's little or not sufficient compliance. And there's no institution to ensure such compliance, to enforce compliance, and to put in place sanctions for failure to comply. Yeah. Given the small land space that we have, and even sea space, relatively speaking, and the damage that could be done if something goes wrong, would we be paying, in terms of our regulations and institution building, special attention to compliance?
Yes, well, those things are included in the agreements. You know, they make provisions for compensation for the governments and countries even after the operator leaves the field. Yeah, at the end of the term of the license, and also there are international agreements that these companies have to comply with in terms of standards. It's not just what the local government says it must do, but there are international standards that they have to comply with. And if they don't comply, then they run into trouble. So there are industry standards that are set that everybody has to follow, in much the same way that there are international standards that are set for international air travel. You know, one particular country and its airlines may look to break rules and make shortcuts and so on. But if they do that, they run afoul of the international standards and they can be decertified.
Okay. Also, well, you know the term resource costs.
Yes.
You have spoken a lot about social impact because I guess it is something in terms of the whole thinking process. A lot of consideration and thought will be given to that as to how we could avoid the mistakes of some other countries with regard in that field. In other words, once you get a lot of resources, then it can have a negative impact in terms of the attitude of the population in terms of work. Crime could follow and all of those things, as you well know. So again, I guess in terms of the thinking, it is something on the front burner.
Yes, I think we have to be very, very mindful of that. You know, there are several things. And when we speak about social responsibility, it is some of those kinds of concerns that you want to anticipate. Yeah. The laws and regulations that will ensure, first and foremost, that the benefits that come from the industry are distributed in a fair, equitable way, that we don't leave large sections of the population behind, that the resources do not land in the pockets of one group of people that are benefiting at the expense of others, that people do not feel as though they're living on the margins of the society, and as such, they have nothing to lose to engage in criminal conduct. Yeah. And then, of course, to ensure that the resources collected are not just spent on consumption for today and on waste, but rather is utilized, is captured and utilized and saved and invested in a way that would ensure that people are provided for in the later years. You know, some countries establish what are called sovereign wealth funds, where the monies are put into that fund and then is used, you know, when there are
Yes,
crises, when there are challenges, when there are difficulties, and so on. Some countries have not used that concept of the sovereign wealth fund because they worry that politicians find justifications for accessing those funds and for using monies to do this and to do that, and to explain that they have to get into the fund because of this importance or that importance. Some countries treat it as use the monies as a national pension fund, as Norway has done, for example. So the entire fund is seen as a pension fund to which everyone in the society is entitled to a pension when they leave. Yeah, in that way, while you're working, you get benefits from the funds, but monies are put aside. Only a small portion. I remember one of the guys telling me only 4% of the budget was used, only 4% of the oil revenues was used to finance the national budget. The rest of the money goes into the World Fund. Yeah. And then, of course, providing services for the people as you go, proper health services, education services, utilities. There are one or two countries now where the citizens are not expected or required to pay electricity bills or telephone bills or internet bills. Internet is seen as just another utility that the state provides. Yeah,
like the
because these
roads.
are considered necessities. Yeah, that people have to use. You know, so finding ways to ensure that the benefits are spread among as many members of the population as possible and as equitably as possible would, in principle at least, minimize the risk that people will resort to criminal behavior in order to get a share of the spoils, so to say.
Also, I think we must take into consideration what other benefits and how the trickle down could actually take place when one start producing oil and making it commercially viable. There are a number of different direct, indirect infrastructures and amenities, services that would be created over time from just the supply of basic things that the drillers or the individuals operating the oil rigs that we could procure in Grenada that create the amenity for food, transportation, maybe to the oil rigs, depending on where it is located. Are we going to be using maybe vessels that are owned by Grenadian, like the Osprey or whatever, so that we get local people involved in the whole transaction, as well as the long-term specialized services that we may be able to offer as we develop the industry and we become more lucrative with all the spills off, not the oil spill, but the spills off financially that would be accrued to the Grenadian people and the Grenadian public. So we are very optimistic that if we do it right, we put the regulations in place, we get the technologies, we get the right operators, and everybody comply and work harmoniously with each other, which is maybe a dream, but if we have the dream, we got to dream big and put things in place to mitigate any of the flaws and pitfalls that others have suffered before. And we have neighbors around and internationally, and we have international partners who knows about many of these, have worked in these countries, so they have given us at the moment, I guess, the best guidance that we could ever look for with the team that we are working with at the moment.
In other words, there are checks and balances in place to secure.
Definitely.
Yes, and you learn from other people's mistakes, as one of the wise men has said. Fools learn from their own mistakes. Wise people learn from the mistakes of others. So we don't want to repeat what everybody else is doing wrong. We want to try and make sure that we can learn from their lessons. Learn the lessons from their experiences and try to get it right. I think Galo is perfectly right on that.
I would just like to highlight some more comments that we've gotten from the audience. Bob is very active this evening, so good evening to you, Bob. He says, sometimes the boundaries intersect like the North Sea, where drilling is shared between the UK and Norway. They share the spoils. Usually an area of the sea called blocks is auctioned off to companies for drilling. Block 22, just off the northwest part of Tobago, is eerie close to Grenada's water based on the delineation line. Sorry. Hence, it's conceivable that Grenada has gas there. The name of the block is called Casaro. There's an international organization that works on the nomenclature. Sorry, get tight tongue sometimes. The naming. It has been registered, and then you can own that name. For example, NCMA is assigned to Trinidad. Yes, there's laws on drilling. Where there's oil, there is usually natural gas, which rises to the top before you get to the oil. In the old days, they would flare the gas like at Pointe-à-Pierre in TNT. Today, it is captured and converted to LNG. So Bob was just commenting as the program went through, so you would see the different points or the different areas he was touching. Then we have Chris. Chris says, so I think this was in response to my question about green energy. He says, so we trashed the planet in order to get the dollars to fix it. And he said, make it make sense. And then Bob further commented, yes, Dr. Gallo, around that time, there was a pilot program at His Majesty's prison in Grenada by the Germans where they made biogas, from the excrements of animals. Where's that program now? And Denton Alexis states, after those oil fields fully developed, being in the territory of the state of Grenada, who will be responsible to protect these oil fields? Will it be the state of the development companies? Bob, Norway's sovereign fund is for all of its citizens. It is invested on Wall Street. Does Guyana, Suriname, or Trinidad have such? Bob, please do not leave out Barbados. They produce oil at 1,000 barrels a day. Perhaps we can ask for their help also. Lennox. He said that he's sorry that the program has ended so soon. Much thanks to all for such good information. Dr. Nurse has been so concise. So I think
Yes. Sorry, I just want to say that as far as the sovereign wealth funds are concerned, I know that Guyana has developed one, and Suriname has developed one. Yeah.
Would they have sovereign funds?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess what has been the general sentiment you have and the committee and the work they did this past week, the general sentiment that we go, but be careful, we don't go what or we go with speed as so that we can reap the benefits as quickly as possible. What kind of feedback generally have you been the committee been picking up? If you have to make a guess, then where do you think Grenadians are on this?
Valo, you want to speak first?
Yeah. Because I'm known by many Grenadians as a geologist, I normally receive a number of back end comments like Bob is doing that, and others, brethren around the world, locally, as well as brethren that I have abroad. And with the quest of going green, people who know me, they may say, well, Gallo jump gun now because he was the one promoting green night and day, and now he's going to oil and gas. But no, there are individuals based on the whole question that Grenada sees its funding possibility for its energy development by going green, and we have other individuals who definitely, based on their own personal convictions, see that the fossil fuel, as has been said, but we have to differentiate between the different type of sources where the hydrocarbons come from. So we have coal, and we have different type of coal. Germany on the east and on the west side have two different type of coals that have been utilized: the lignite coal, or the so-called soft coal, in contrast to the anthracite coal, which has a higher calorific value in burning, and also which one of these liberate more CO2 into the atmosphere. But there are technologies in order to capture these things. So as we go along with our processes, it's not just only producing oil. There are other things that could be derived from the hydrogen atom that are present, the green, the blue hydrogen. These are different things that we could when we start extracting and doing the processing, even become even more modern, where these same molecules could be broken to become green as well. So I believe that when we talk about the Grenadians who might be having some notions about going the direction we are trying to go at this point in time, I could simply say maybe 5 to 10% based on the household they are coming from. Of course, the environmentalists, the activists have been looking at different projects around local areas. Think about the Liverer area where Spectre operates. They're seeing development that seemingly at times seem fail. We have the land actors seeing what went on in areas where we are building other infrastructure for tourism purposes and have issues with these things. So generally, the whole question that we are seeing, global warming is very important. And the question is, are we actually the cause of our own personal climate change in Grenada? When I look around at the island, and I look at our,
Well, I know what I'm not trying to gauge is what kind of feedback you have at the committee as a whole.
Well, the question is, we got to understand processes in order to make these type of accusations or have these type of strict, one-sided, inflexible way of visualizing development, and which these type of development are negative in a sense because of putting things in a pot and not looking at each of the factors that are responsible and where our blame have to be given on us as a people, and not even the environment itself that is having those type of problems that we are seeing today. We are seeing hot periods, dry periods, etc. etc. But I would say that basically about 10% of the Grenadian may be against what we are doing at the moment.
Okay, so you take overwhelmingly people support.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I share the view. In fact, I have a lower number. My my thinking is that somewhere between 5 and 7%. I have nothing, no, I mean, it's just a rule of thumb based on conversations. I can't say that with any precision. But the sense I get from the feedback that we receive would suggest to me that the vast majority of people would like us to give it a try.
I asked the question not to say that that should be the decisive factor now in terms of decision making, but just to gauge how much more education and persuasion has to be done if the decision is to go in that direction. Let me ask another question though. Would Grenada, if we were to go into the oil and gas industry, would we be the smallest nation state in the world who has such an industry? We have smaller ones in the Pacific.
Um, Probably it's going to be the smallest. I can't think of any that is of a smaller size that is doing
Good land size and
oil
population.
and gas. There are other natural resources, but not oil and gas, as far as I can recall. I don't want to say that with certainty, but
Yeah, definitely.
I can't think.
The thought just crossed my mind, you know.
Yeah, I can't think.
Guyana is a massive place, Venezuela, Trinidad, much bigger than
In
us.
terms of, yeah,
Ten
both in
times
terms of
over.
population
Yeah.
and physical land area,
Mm.
I don't think that there's anyone smaller than us doing that. And
I
the
think our experts might be able to give us a concrete answer to that because they have analyzed data worldwide of different areas and different zones, maybe small island states in the Pacific or other areas may be as a group of countries have smaller size as individual islands and have gone similar directions, started off from zero, like how we are started. So we cannot maybe make that statement at the moment, but we can verify.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Aisha, I think there are one or two, in particular, one long comment. I think that's Friends of the Earth Grenada.
Yes, I see. For Grenada, he quotes, "The issue of fossil fuels, therefore, was highlighted in both the written and oral proceedings, and the ICJ addressed the issue frontally by the ICJ in its oral proceedings in December 2024, and Judges Bandari and Cleveland, in their joint declaration, examined the issue of fossil fuel production in greater depth. The position of states on the issue of fossil fuels can be roughly divided into three camps. The first, the first, which includes several major fossil fuel producing countries, suggests that I think the comment got cut off that there. So I think his comment got cut off. So if it is that he can add the rest, I'll be happy to read it. And Bob also comments, just like oil, we have the term sweet crude from Nigeria and Saudi Arabia. Most countries would like to buy it due to its low sulfur content, etc., etc. Bob further comments, another natural resource in Grenada is the NE trade wind, which blows incessantly from Lavera and Bathway. Maybe you may want to introduce windmills. And okay, yes, so those are the comments that we had, the additional comments.
Okay, so before we end, just one last time recognize those who sponsor this program: Gel Professional Solutions Inc., Gem FM, carried on FM radio out in Canada, and Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. So Gallo, I don't know if you want to just move to some final comments before, I know you say you have an appointment.
Um, in all of these major capital development that Grenada has in mind to bring on stream, I do believe that we need to build capacity and we need to bring education on these energy matters in the school system as young as the kindergarten, because we are here at the age of three scores plus, and we are just igniting what's going on. And should any of these big capital projects with respect to energy become very um, let's say on stream, we need to have young boys and girls in Grenada start adapting or thinking on the school system, presenting curriculum to take care of our energy matters. I remember we had developed an energy awareness educational project from the OS in 2011, 2012, the CIAP, and that meant that we should bring all of these type of thoughts to the school, be it from basically primary school, secondary school to TAMCC, and even maybe extending the type of courses as SGU develop, not only from the medical standpoint, but interrelated sciences that would facilitate and create the necessary capacity for our youngsters to gain the perks that would be derived from industries like this when they thrive, so that we may not have to import too many specialists as we are doing at the moment, but that Grenadians would be the ones that would be able to utilize the curriculum and push the economy with their spending at home in an investment at home with the revenues that would be derived from the oil and gas industry. And I would say to the Grenadian people, bear with us, support us, because you're supporting our country in making decisions and going forward in order to bring the better living standard and livelihood for our people. So let us make the right job decisions and put us on the payroll. Thanks.
So, and you leave with us that maybe if everything goes smoothly, it will take about 7 to 10 years before the first set of oil comes out of the ground for commercial purposes.
Basically.
Okay. That's?
Yes, well, I want to close with what I consider to be the sort of critical success factors, what it is that we really need to do in order to succeed. And I think above all, we need to try to get buy-in at the national level from as many stakeholders as possible. We must try to do this, not fighting against ourselves, but rather taking a collective national decision that we want to take advantage of this opportunity if it exists. And so building consensus and broadening the network of people who can contribute, who can advise, who can recommend is important. Training of young people so that they can see this as something in which they have a stake and in which the future can partially depend is important. Hence the reason for Gallo's contributions there as well. So I think that is a very important piece, getting that nationwide commitment to make it happen. The second thing that is of some importance, I believe, is that the government must be transparent about what it does, keep people educated, people informed. They must not be second guessing what the government is doing. There must be no deals under the table, quiet engagements, contracts being signed that people don't know anything about. And because that kind of practice creates a culture of mistrust. And where there is mistrust, there's not going to be unity. So I think the second thing I would see for that is the critical importance of communication and transparency with the populace. And the third one is patience and tolerance, the critical importance of realizing that this is not something that will happen overnight. As Gallo pointed out, it can be 5 to 7 years before we know exactly where things are, but we know that we are making progress. We have a lot of good people helping us, and we feel confident that there is something there for us to take advantage of. So we want to say on behalf of the technical working group that we are very happy for the opportunity to take on this mandate. We're working very hard to try and give life to it, and we ask for the full cooperation of all of the citizens as we try to keep people informed and educated. And we look forward to working together for the good of Grenada. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I wanted to ask one last question. Not really a big question, but Trinidad started the oil industry how long ago?
1912.
1912, over 100 years ago. Any thought as to why it has taken us this long to embark on this process? I know we became independent only 50 years ago.
It is
Trinidad, of
difficult.
course, is 60 years ago.
Yeah, it is difficult to say
Okay.
why this has happened, especially because since independence, certainly all governments have recognized the critical need to diversify the economy and to move away from just agriculture and tourism as the only two sectors we depend on. But rather than focusing on the possibility and the potential of oil and gas, we look to offshore banking, we look to informatics, we look to citizenship by investment, and other initiatives that truly are themselves very tenuous and very vulnerable. So the irony of it all is that you have this potential resource, a frontier, an economic frontier, that we recognize the need for it to explore something new and different. This is sitting right there in plain sight. And we just continue to look for other things that don't make us any more secure because they're just as vulnerable as tourism and agriculture. So it is difficult to say. We've made some terrible missteps along the way in 1996 with Grindberg and in 2007 with the Global Petroleum Group. Those two relationships started out on a very bad footing. And, I think those are two critical missteps. And, that itself has set back the country's hydrocarbon ambition by at least 30 years. So it's a sad episode, but we can't sit and lament. We have to move forward, keep pushing forward, and try to realize the possibilities.
So I guess as the soca artist says, that the stars are not aligned. Just keep following up from the stars are all aligned now. Aisha, you want to say anything as we close?
I just want to thank Mr. Burke and Dr. Nurse both for coming onto the program this evening and for contributing. I also would like to thank our audience for being so engaged in this evening. I think this topic is one that they thoroughly enjoyed, and we look forward to hearing more about the project as it continues.
Yes.
Well, in closing, please allow me to say that I have looked at the comments that were made tonight by the contributors. We must thank them. It shows some of them are quite knowledgeable. I'm looking at Bob's contributions. Evidently, he's quite knowledgeable and evidently quite passionate about what's going on. We want to thank those of you who have made contributions. Your observations are going to be noted. Your recommendations are going to be noted. I hope with your help, Mr. Layne, you would be able to share with us those recommendations so that we can harvest those and build those into the stakeholder mapping exercises that we are undertaking at the moment. So thank you very much on behalf of the technical working group for having us on, and thank you to the members for the contributors for the very erudite and valuable contributions they've made here tonight. Thank you so much.
One more thing to say.
To my brethren, Bob, I would say I know we have been talking about this, but I have forgotten to have reached out to you because you have reached out to me, and I think we have a team behind the team, what we call subject matter experts that Naz mentioned early in the evening. So maybe if you want to lend your services to us through that angle, I do think the chairman is here to acknowledge that, and I would get in contact with you and brief you on how we go about that. Thanks for your comment and your contribution in all respect.
Okay, so Naz, Gallo, I want to really thank you for appearing, and of course, as a Grenadian, I wish you the very best in your work. It's something that is of great importance for Grenada, and we have seen the mistakes other countries have made, and we want to, of course, avoid those mistakes. I really want to thank you, and I want to thank the audience, thank those who have participated by putting things in the chat. Thank you very much. Next week, Sunday, we are not going to have any program because Grenada will be marking National Heroes Day, so they have significance in the country. Otherwise, also, and out of respect, we will not have any program next week, Sunday. But we continue, we recommence on the 26th of October. Sunday, the 26th of October. So thank you very much, everyone, and good night.
Thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
good night to
Thank
you.
you.
Good night to you, Ms. Mclean, and wishing you guys the best. Thank you.
Bye. Okay.
Right.